Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Nubia channel. My name is Shatina, and in today's video, I am going to be sharing my experience with infertility and then eventually becoming pregnant, and then the ending result, my experience with labor. So I do want to start by saying that my reason for sharing this video is because I want to give hope and be encouraging to anyone who may be wanting to embark on this journey of motherhood, who may be on this journey and they are, running into some bumps that can actually be quite discouraging. And also to give a little insight of what it's like to actually be pregnant, but and in labor, and experience labor, and it be kind of scary, I guess. Not scary, but there can be some things that, as a new mom, um, you might be worried about. And so I just wanted to share my experience because I just feel like it would that it would help somebody. So let's start from the beginning. So I've I have had the desire to be a mom since the age of 15, and I believe that that desire was initially put in my heart around that age um, because it was planted there by God. Ultimately, that's what I feel. I truly believe that God planted in my heart that desire to want to be a mother someday. And I feel that way because around that age, I actually prayed to him about it. I asked that he would someday allow me to bear children. And at that time, I didn't know God on a personal level. I knew of him as an invisible being. I knew that I could pray to him, and I knew that he would answer prayers. Um, I didn't grow up in the church or anything like that. I had been in church a few times as a small child, but in my teenage years, went to I never went to church. Um, I knew nothing of Jesus. I didn't know that he was the Son of God. Um, I didn't know that Jesus had died for the sins of the world so that we could be reconciled to God and live with him eternally in heaven. So I didn't know these things. And the closest thing that I had to any relationship with God at that time, besides that prayer that I just mentioned, is that whenever I would have a nightmare, in the middle of the night, I would wake up, and turn on the TV, turn it on to TBN, and on TBN they would have there would be like, they would be playing worship music or praise music, and that would calm me down and help me get back to sleep. So that's how it was for me at that time. So let's fast forward to my young adult, my young adult years. So age 20, 21, around that time, I I find out that my fertility is challenged. And how I found that out was because um, I was experiencing pain, pelvic pain on both sides, and also I would have, random abnormal bleeding. And going to my primary doctor that I had at the time, they had recommended that I do an ultrasound. They saw something in that ultrasound and referred me to a gynecologist gynecologist did her own ultrasound, and she basically explained to me that I had a condition to where both my fallopian tubes were filled with fluid. So they looked like mini sausages when they appeared on the ultrasound screen to her, or ultrasound pictures to her. And it was described that my left fallopian tube was much worse than my right side. And she laid out my options of how I, could potentially save any type of possibility of me being able to conceive children in the future. So she basically told me that I should have surgery to remove the left tube because it was most damaged, and to at least let her try and flush out the fluid on the right side in hopes that, that flushing procedure would work and I would be able to conceive. And, that was fine. I agreed to the appointment and everything. But there were downsides to having that procedure done because, one, I would be down one fallopian tube, and so, my chances of ever conceiving children would have been much lower. And also, there was that possibility that even though the right tube was flushed, it could have reclosed. So what ended up happening is I did not follow through on the appointment that I had made with her for having the procedure done. She called me about 3 times and I didn't answer her call. I never went back to her or the primary doctor that referred her to me. And I believe that God put that in my heart to pray the prayer that I did, in my young teenage life was because He knew that this would happen to me. And to be honest, at that time, at 15 years old, I was a freshman in high school. I was not sexually active. I wasn't interested in dating. I didn't have a boyfriend, and I still was in this childlike mentality. I was still into playing with Barbie dolls, and I was very introverted. I had one friend, and when I wasn't at school, I didn't have friends outside of school. I would play with my sister. She would be she was my friend. My sister was my friend. So that's to kind of give you a perspective of where I was coming from and why I strongly believe that that God was preparing me for this journey that I was about to embark on, as far as my fertility goes. And I apologize for looking around. I'm just, searching my mind for these memories, And so, a few years pass, and I, a few years pass, and I don't, do anything about it. I just kind of live with the fact that at this point, that I was infertile, right? Um, and so around age 23, 24, I start to think about, the condition that I was diagnosed with, which the condition was called hydrosalpinx. And I had done some research on it, throughout those years, and learned that, if there was a chance that conception could happen with this, that it most likely would end in a early termination of pregnancy, because the fluid that that's stuck in the tubes, it's toxic. And if it was to make its way down to, you know, to a developing embryo, then, it would be deadly to that embryo, and most likely it wouldn't survive. And so I do recall throughout that time that I just asked God to again allow me to someday bear children. I pray that so many times because it was something, like I said, it was a desire in my heart. And so I bring up the topic again around age 23, 24. Like that topic comes up to my mind. And I start looking for another primary doctor. And then what comes to mind is a doctor that my mom had taken me to when I was younger. And I called her up to see if she would see me, and she did. And, she was very compassionate, and she listened very well to what my concerns were. And she basically referred me to a gynecologist that she was really cool with. And that gynecologist had did her own ultrasound and also requested my medical records from the previous primary and gynecologist that I had seen before. And when she compared the two, you know, the paperwork from the first time I was diagnosed with hydrosalpinx to what she had from the ultrasound that she had requested, there was a little difference. She told me that the fluid had decreased, like the size of my fallopian tubes were not as large as they were before. She said it was still blocked, but and the left one was worse than the right, but they had ultimately shrank. So so she told me that, well, she asked me if I was considering having children anytime soon, and I was at a point where I wasn't committed to anybody. I wasn't, I wasn't in a relationship per se. Like, I was in a relationship, but I didn't know how long I would be in the relationship, so I didn't say, I just said no. I'm not planning on children right now, but I do want it eventually, so she tells me that when you're ready to have children, then we can go over your options, but as of right now, don't even worry about it. So I was like, okay, we don't talk about it anymore. I go to her for a few other procedures or whatnot, unrelated to the hydrosalpinx, but throughout those visits, hydrosalpinx does not come up. It's just the annual exam and that's it. So let's fast forward to a couple years down the line. So at the age of 26, okay, I become a new wife, and a month into my marriage, I find out that I was pregnant. I naturally conceived, and as exciting as that was, there was uncertainty there. I was excited, but there was uncertainty there because I was pregnant, but it didn't have a good start. Okay, I believe that I bled for the first 3 months of my pregnancy, and that was the most trying thing for me because I had that condition, and I'm thinking, oh no, what if that fluid goes and harms my developing child, So, I the doctors explaining to me. I'm looking up stuff. It's normal to bleed early on in pregnancy, but eventually it goes away. But I'm like, I'm bleeding for 3 months straight. I understand implantation bleeding lasting 6 weeks, but for me, I'm bleeding for 3 months, for the first 3 months, and it was just nerve-wracking, emotional, and I'm talking to people about it, and they're just not saying the things I want to hear. It's not calming me. It's not making me feel any better. So, um, during this time of, being a little, not a little, but being worried, I just asked God to be with me, through my pregnancy. I pray to Him, and I want to say within that, into that fourth month, maybe fifth month, the bleeding subsided. And from there, it was pretty much smooth sailing as far as how my pregnancy went. My pregnancy was pretty much textbook perfect. After that point, I was gaining weight at the rate that I was supposed to, um, the amount I was supposed to for my size. My child was developing normally. There were no pregnancy complications. The tests that were being done, they were all coming back normal. So that in itself was a blessing, and it was wonderful. Despite how it started off, you know, that whole experience as a first time mom, you know, it was perfect, you know. Um, and so yeah, I really enjoyed being pregnant. Um, and then let's talk about, or let's move forward to the time for when I am to deliver this child, right? So I make it to full term, pretty much. And at 38 weeks, I have my doctor's appointment. She tells me that I am 3 centimeters dilated, and that, if the baby was to come anytime from there up until my actual due date, then, it would be fine because the child would be fully developed. So a few days after that visit, I experienced the most excruciating tummy ache ever. Now, there's no pain at all throughout my pregnancy. I'm not in any pain or anything like that. I want to say that there may have been one day of pain, which that was around a 38-week period as well, and that was just from like standing up so long, and the blood is all draining down to your legs, and your feet is getting all swelling and things like that. But at that time, I was just on my feet too long, and I had a little bit of back pain or whatever. But most of my pregnancy, there was no pain. But this one time, like I mentioned, after my 38-week visit with the doctor, I have the most excruciating stomach pain ever. I had made myself some beef stroganoff hamburger helper and ate it, and it did not agree with my system. And so what ended up happening was I ended up, now this is TMI, but I ended up with loose bowels and vomiting all at the same time. So I'm using the toilet and throwing up at the same time, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. And if this is anything like what birthing a child is like, then I can surely do it. So that was my perspective on it, because that's how painful it was to me. And I don't recall ever experiencing Braxton Hicks, and if I did, then I didn't know that's what it was because I didn't feel them. You know, I didn't feel contractions throughout my pregnancy. The only thing I ever felt was this tummy ache, and that was at 38 weeks and some days. Okay, so um, I want to say that was probably like the next day or even the same day of that doctor appointment, to be honest, because I gave birth at 38 weeks and 3 days. So, yeah. But, so let's say at 38 weeks, 3 days, let's say 3 days the, um, after the beef stroganoff incident, right? I I have this urge to poop, and I'm hoping that it's not this situation that I went through before, you know. So it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I have this urge to poop, and you know I'm not experiencing any stomach pain or anything. I just feel like I need to go to the bathroom, and so I go. I'm home alone, and I'm sitting on the toilet and nothing's coming out, you know. So after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna just sit here on the toilet and nothing's happening, because then I even lose the sensation to use the bathroom. So I go to wipe and I look down and I see a, you know, a clump of blood, you know, and I'm like, what is that? Now I had read that, you know, sometimes, you know, a woman when she's about to go into labor, she'll lose, or just before labor, she will lose her mucus plug. And so I thought maybe that's what it was, but I wasn't sure, and I was like, I should just go lay down. So because there was some blood, you know, it didn't sit all the way right with me. Like I didn't have a whole lot of peace with going to bed um, after just seeing that. And so I called my mom instead, and I'm like, hey, mom, you know, I was just using the bathroom, and I noticed a clump of blood, and I want to go to sleep because I have to go to work the next day, but um, I don't know if I should. And she tells me, no, you need to go to the hospital. And, you know, my husband, he was at work at the time. He didn't get off till 2 in the morning. And, you know, here it is after midnight. And, yeah, I'm going through this. So I'm not having any contractions or anything. My water hasn't broken. So far, all I had experienced is just this loss of what I believe to be the mucus plug. So we get to the hospital, um, and I let them know what's going on, and they start taking my insurance information, you know, and while they're signing me in to get me set up in the maternity ward, they there's this woman being rolled out on this hospital bed, and she's in active labor. She's hollering. She's just in so much pain, and I'm like, wow, you know, I don't know. I hope that's not me, you know. So I go after getting all registered in and everything. I go and I sit in a chair, and a nurse comes out and with a wheelchair, and she wheels me to this back area. Um, my mom, she's waiting out in like the lobby area, and so the lady, she takes my vitals and everything. She checks me, and she says, "Are you in any pain?" And I say, "No." She says, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Because you're 8 centimeters dilated." And I'm like, "Huh?" So I'm in active labor at that point. So they hook me up to all these machines. They call my mom on back, and she's waiting with me. My husband finally gets there, and they start doing what they do, doing the IVs, putting on this belt to track the baby's heart rate, things like that, and how the contractions are and things like that, and monitoring the contractions. And I'm still not in pain or anything. And the nurse says that she's going to call my doctor to let her know that I'm in active labor. And so they're having trouble getting in touch with my doctor. I don't know how long we're there for, but they're monitoring me and they're like, are you in any pain, any medicine, anything we could do? And I'm not in pain, so I don't get an epidural. Um, I don't do anything. I'm just chilling, right? So I recall that I had before, actually going into labor sometime before. I had a dream that God was helping me to deliver my baby. And so while I'm laying there, in the hospital bed, I recall that dream, you know. And so I just start singing, I start singing, "Oh Jesus, oh Jesus, your presence is heaven to me." And um, the nurse, I guess she took that as me being in pain, So she asked me, she's like, "Do you want a heating pad?" And I'm like, "Sure." I'm just going along with the experience. I'm not having pain or anything, but I just sing that song because at that time, I, like I said, I had recalled that dream that I had, and my water still hadn't broken, and that's pretty much what we was waiting for. We was waiting for two things: my water to break, and for the doctor to show up. And the nurse goes and gets the heating pad, and you know, me and my husband we're singing this song, and I lay on the heating pad, and as soon as that happens, my water breaks. Um, my water breaks. My mom done left the room. She done went off to the bathroom somewhere, and a short time later, you know, the 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 nurse is like, she still can't get a hold of my doctor, and if I feel like pushing, don't push, but let her know. And I'm like, okay. So I don't know how much time passes, but it's not a whole lot of time, and I get that urge to push. And so the doctor's still not there yet. I tell the nurse that I feel like I need to push. She walks out one more time, and then when she comes back, she asks, "Okay, do you want to just start pushing?" And I was like, "Yeah," because I had low key already started on my own. And so the right when we get ready to start pushing, that's when the doctor comes in. She's not the doctor that was originally supposed to deliver my child, but it was like her backup. So the backup doctor comes in, she starts pushing. She's like, "Come on, start pushing," and I'm not pushing for very long at all. I don't, at this point, I still don't feel any pain until I feel my baby's head start to actually come through the canal. It was like this burning sensation, and the doctor was like, "Slow down, you don't want to tear." But with that feeling of, I could feel the burning. um, I I could not stop. It was like that urge to push just made me push. And I want to say that part hurt a little bit. That part hurt. That part did hurt because of the burning and the tearing. I think that's what I felt. Um, and she came on out, but out of the whole experience, you know, my the worst part of it for me was getting stitches. That part hurt the worst. It hurt worse than actually pushing my child out. Um, if I could say, I would think that my pregnancy, my child, my birthing my child, all of that was relatively painless or minimal pain for me. And so I just give all that glory to God because um, yeah, I don't think it would have happened otherwise. You know, I could have been like what so many videos that I had seen depicted, you know, of it just being this really awful experience. And even, you know, to think about um, what I had saw moments before actually, you know, giving birth, you know, the woman in the um, being transported on the hospital bed in active labor and how much pain she was in, you know, that could have set the tone for me, you know, for what it could have been like, but that fortunately was not my experience, and I thank God for it. And so that is my experience of infertility, actually getting pregnant, and you know, birthing my first child. It's been about 7 years uh, since my last pregnancy. I've been pregnant 2 times in my life, and both ended up in live births. Both my children are here. They're developing. Um, they're thriving, and I thank God for them. So that is my story. I hope that that it encourages someone. I hope that it gives you hope, and you know, just stay in there. Whatever you believe, you know, just believe the best for your situation. Don't give up. And yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. All right, take care.